All right. Yeah, this is going to be a longer one. So settle in. Because what we're watching right now is how the Republican Party isn't just political drama. It's not a bad news cycle. Um, it's not a temporary feud. It's a system reaching the limits of its own contradictions. And when systems hit that point, they don't adapt politely. They fracture. I want to be very precise about this because precision matters. Marjorie Taylor Greene didn't just criticize Donald Trump. She didn't just throw shade at Mike Johnson. She didn't just have a bad media day. What she did was signal publicly that the internal logic holding MAGA together is failing. And she did it in a way that people who understand power dynamics immediately recognized. She said the dam is breaking. That phrase isn't rhetorical. It's diagnostic. For years, the Republican Party has operated under a very specific incentive structure. Loyalty to Trump was rewarded. Dissent was punished. Primary threats, fundraising, pressure, social media pile-ons. The system worked because fear worked. But fear only works as long as the enforcer is perceived as inevitable. What happens when inevitability collapses? That's what you're watching. Marjorie Taylor Greene went on CNN and said something that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago.
It's clearly also really tragic just for the Reiner family.
Oh, yes.
I mean, you have no problem calling out what the president said, but why do you think other Republicans have struggled to do so?
I can't comprehend it, but Caitlin, I'd like to point something out. Just last week, and I think the dam is breaking. Many Republicans may not have called him out, but last week, 13 Republicans voted with Democrats to overturn one of President Trump's executive orders, which enabled him to fire federal workers. We also saw Indiana Republicans vote against redistricting. He didn't call any of them traitors and call for primaries against them. But I would like to say that that is a sign where you're seeing Republicans, they're entering the campaign phase for 2026, which is a large signal that lame duck season has begun and that Republicans will go in all in for themselves in order to save their own reelections.
You think the dam is breaking?
Those aren't culture war talking points. Those are material conditions. And here's the part people need to understand. When even the most extreme loyalists pivot to material conditions, it means the symbolic narrative has stopped working. For a long time, Trump's messaging relied on emotional substitution, anger instead of solutions, identity instead of policy, conflict instead of competence. That works until people can't pay rent, until groceries double, until healthcare becomes unaffordable, until layoffs hit. At that point, no amount of outrage can mask reality. Then she went directly after Trump's wealth signaling.
What I would like to see from the president is empathy for Americans. Donald Trump is a billionaire and he's the president of the United States. When he looks into a camera and says affordability is a hoax and just totally tries to make nothing out of inflation, he's talking to Americans that are suffering and have been suffering for many years now and are having a hard time making ends meet. And so that's not the right message to tell Americans.
That matters because it reframes the narrative. Trump built his brand on being the voice of forgotten Americans. When even his allies start portraying him as detached elite wealth, the brand collapses. Empathy isn't optional in politics. It's infrastructure. And she said Trump doesn't have it. Then came the midterms. She didn't hedge. She didn't soften it. She said MAGA Republicans are heading for an absolute disaster.
Do you think in 1 year from now, Mike Johnson will be the Speaker of the House?
1 year from now, I think that's hard to say. I think the midterms are going to be very hard for Republicans. I'm one of the people that's willing to admit the truth and say I don't see Republicans winning the midterms right now. So that doesn't bode well for Mike Johnson.
This is critical because internal actors don't say this publicly unless they believe the math is already broken. Now let's talk about the moment that fundamentally changed the moral calculus. The murder of Rob Reiner and his wife, Michelle. This was a family annihilated by tragedy. Their son arrested. Addiction, mental illness. A story that should have triggered compassion. Trump chose cruelty. He attacked the victims, spread lies, politicized grief, suggested causation where there was none. Marjorie Taylor Greene said that crossed the line, not politically, humanly.
His supporters, including myself, we didn't appreciate hearing the president, who himself was shot, and after Charlie Kirk's horrific murder, we didn't appreciate, even if you don't agree with Rob Reiner politically, there was no reason for his statement to be the statement that he made.
Yeah, when he says, I mean, it was in the immediate aftermath of us finding out about Rob Reiner, and obviously now his son has been taken into custody. You've said that his murder was not about politics or political enemies. The president called him bad for our country and said he was a deranged person as far as Trump is concerned.
I thought that statement was absolutely completely below the office of the president of the United States, classless, and it was just wrong. It's a tragic murder. It's a family ripped apart. And from my understanding, what I've seen on the news, it was drug abuse and mental illness. And many families across America deal with family members that are drug addicts or have mental health issues. And I think the president should have responded with compassion and talked about those issues. He didn't have to make it about politics. And I think that was, it was really below what we expect our president to talk like.
That moment mattered. Then she pivoted to the Epstein files, and this is where the temperature drops. She said the survivors themselves believe a list exists.
You mentioned the few places where you've broken with him, including on the Epstein files and having those released. The DOJ deadline is Friday. And Susie Wiles was actually pretty critical of the Justice Department's handling of this so far. She said there is no client list, and it sure as hell wasn't on Pam Bondi's desk. Why do you think the Attorney General said that it was then?
I'm not sure. I don't have specifics on that, but I've listened to the women themselves. And the women themselves, a smaller portion of them, which is, there's a lot of them. They think there's around 1,000 victims, but a smaller portion of these women say that there is a list of men, rich, powerful men, that they were passed around to. Now, that's a list that they have kept to themselves, frankly, because they're terrified. These women don't have money to pay attorneys if they get sued. Every expense comes out of their own pockets. And after death threats that I've received, supporting and keeping my name on the discharge petition, for the first time, I can understand exactly what they've been intimidated by for so many years. So as far as what Susie Wiles and Pam Bondi were talking, I can't speak to specifics on that, but I can speak to what the women have told me.
This is explosive because it undercuts one of the core defense mechanisms of the elite. Silence through fear. Now zoom out to Capitol Hill. House Republicans are losing procedural votes.
Well, there's a lot of news, and I'll tell you right now, Katie, there's something else that's going on right now at this moment. House Republicans are on the floor about to lose another vote, a key vote that would allow them to bring a series of bills to the floor of limited interest, Katie, to most people on planet Earth, but of intense interest to me. They are losing a bill that would allow them to bring up a permitting reform bill. This House Republican conference, Katie, is just an unmitigated disaster. I mean, it's just, and And we see right here, 206 to 210, 6 Republicans voting against the resolution. They cannot get anything done on health care. They have a bill on the floor this week that's just a bunch of warmed over Republican health care policies that they've already passed this Congress. Moderate Republicans, the majority makers, Katie, the people that made Mike Johnson the speaker, and before that, Kevin McCarthy, the speaker, they want to vote on extending these premium subsidies for Obamacare, the same thing we've been now talking about for 5 or 6 months. They are, the speaker is not allowing that to happen in short. He wants them offset with other budget cuts. He has concerns about pro-life provisions in these subsidies, and the moderates are just furious with him. But Katie, the entire conference is getting pretty tired of this. I mean, ever since the shutdown, they have not, and frankly, ever since July, they've not been able to get their act together. And we're seeing that again right now. It's just a completely unmitigated disaster for Speaker Mike Johnson at this moment.
Unmitigated disaster, strong word.
Moderate Republicans are openly furious. The people who delivered the majority, the swing district members, the ones who actually determine control, they want to extend Obamacare subsidies. Mike Johnson is blocking them. Why? Ideological rigidity, base appeasement, optics over outcomes. Mike Lawler stands up and calls it political malpractice. And he's right. Blocking subsidies while voters are drowning in medical costs is electoral suicide. Mike Johnson responds with unity language, with process talk, with pressure valve metaphors.
Well, Mike Lawler is a very dear friend and a close colleague of mine. And ironically, weekend before last, I was in New York in his district on Long Island, and we were campaigning together, ensuring that he gets reelected. Mike Lawler fights hard for New York, as every Republican in this conference does for their districts. The districts are different. They have different priorities and ideas, but there's about a dozen members in the conference that are in these swing districts who are fighting hard to make sure that they reduce costs for all of their constituents. And many of them did want to vote on this Obamacare, COVID era subsidy the Democrats created. We looked for a way to try to allow for that pressure release valve, and it just was not to be. We worked on it all the way through the weekend, in fact, and in the end, there was not an agreement wasn't made. Now, everybody was at the table in good faith, and I certainly appreciate the views and the opinions of every member of this conference. But I will tell you one thing: they will all join in unity on is voting for this bill that we've been discussing this morning.
Punchbowl News reports Republicans openly considering signing Democratic discharge petitions. That's extraordinary. That's not negotiation. That's bypass. This is what happens when leadership loses legitimacy. The conference is exhausted. Since the shutdown, since July, nothing moves. Nothing passes. Nothing resolves. It's paralysis. If you care about understanding what's actually happening beneath the headlines, don't disengage. Share this. Talk about it. Support independent media. Subscribe. Because the collapse of a narrative always precedes the collapse of power. And once that process starts, it doesn't reverse. All right. Yeah. Thanks for listening.